Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the regular session of the Swampscott School Committee. Today is Thursday, January 26th, and welcome. Glad you could join us. If I could, we call this meeting to order. If you are able, please, let's say the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, fantastic. Again, welcome to everyone who is joining us. This is, well, the next couple meetings we have are, I think, one of the most important things that we do as a committee, and that's talk budget for the next fiscal year. And that'll be the majority of our discussion for this meeting and the public hearing next week. But before we start, is there any public comment? I don't see any. Is there any public? I don't see any public comment out there, and seeing no public in our room, we will push right along to committee announcements, and let's start with Ms. O'Connor.
But glad that we are back and working on our second round of bargaining with our teachers union. Not so much public comment, but I forwarded to each of you a presentation that was given to the Board of Selectmen at the end of last year about assessments, home assessments that have gone up pretty significantly, which obviously means significantly more revenue for the town. And I forwarded some questions as it relates to the superintendent and Ms. Stella, because, so anyway, I forwarded it to all of you. I would encourage everybody to take a look at it because I think it's pretty curious. It was triggered by the fact that I opened my own tax bill, which was significantly higher than 2 years ago. And it was triggered basically because all of our homes have been reassessed, which happens every 5 years, one of the people on the Board of Assessors told me. And it was pretty significant, I think, to the, the town is seeing up between 15 and 20% growth. So it's a curious thing for me. I'll be interested to see how all of the budget pans out. Hopefully it's in our favor.
Hopefully.
So.
Would you like a preview with an answer to that question?
Nope, it's just public comment or committee comment.
You beat me to the punch right now. Ms. Wright.
I don't have any school-related public comment. I just wanted to encourage people to go to the forum that's on Saturday morning. The town is doing a kind of like a charrette to look at the Anthony's property and see what the potential is.
Great.
I think it starts at 10.
Charrette. Isn't a charrette like preliminary?
I think they're doing, they're gathering information.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And it's at 10 at Anthony's.
Excellent. Great. Ms. Marshall.
I don't have anything tonight.
Okay. Mr. Giantis.
Nothing specific. Also glad to be back, jumping into budget season here. So.
Yes. All right. Thank you. And for me, I have a couple things, but I'll wait until we get to chair comments.
We have Jesse and Afia.
Jesse, I'm so sorry. Jesse, you're up.
I don't have anything.
Come on, Jesse, save me.
Afia?
It's the end of the first semester at the high school, and for seniors, we're starting to finish out, and it's exciting. And internships for high schoolers start on Tuesday, so that will be exciting for the kids that have internships.
Well, that's fantastic. Are you doing an internship?
I am. I'll be at Clark School from 7:30 in the morning until 1 p.m.
Fantastic.
in Mrs. Wheeler's classroom with the kindergarten.
Wow, that's great.
Yes, I'm very excited.
All right, excellent.
Do you have any idea what other kinds of what other students are doing?
I know there's a MECO one for MECO students or kids who are want to learn more about how the MECO program works, and I also know there's a social media one for the school overall. So that's all I know about.
I'm sure Mr. Kohut can add to it, who's here tonight.
That'd be great. I know it's an important thing when my kids were going through it. All right. Superintendent's report.
Thank you. So tonight, I would like to start with Mr. Kohut's presentation. Mr. Kohut, I will share my screen and forward it and move it forward for you. As many of you know, I have a second office, a satellite office here at the high school, and so it's been great to bounce ideas off of have immediacy with the high school leadership team. And so Mr. Kohut had brought a situation to my attention, and we felt it was important enough to bring to the school committee tonight. So let me just share my screen, and I will control your presentation if that's okay with you, Mr. Kohut. While I'm doing this, can you talk about other internship opportunities there may be for our kids?
Sure. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
I'm using headphones. Okay, great. So we have a few. I mean, most of them are within the school district. It's through a state-funded internship program for kids who are interested specifically in education. So we have 5 students who are in that program. Our senior project, I think Mr. Passer you had referred to that, is on hiatus. A big reason for that was because of the pandemic, because we couldn't get placements, right? A lot of internship partners, I think, had cold feet about agreeing to having kids participate in the program. So we're hoping to get that back online when we hire a career counselor. We posted for a career counselor position for this year and next, primarily to help with the innovation pathways. We'll have our first group of kids doing their innovation pathways, capstones, and internships next year, but also long-term being able to bring senior project back and having that person hired. It's challenging without having a dedicated sort of full-time person managing senior project to be able to do that and do it well. So we do have some kids doing internships, but it's not to the level that it was pre-pandemic.
Thank you.
I have a question. Question for you about the career counselor. Is that as challenging to hire for as other education position?
Hard to say for sure. We do have some candidates who look strong on paper. We're looking to interview next week, but all of them have experience in what we're looking for. It's different in that we don't need someone who needs a specific license, right? So it's not like a guidance counselor or an adjustment counselor or a teacher, right? We're looking for people who have kind of a range of experiences and can work with partner organizations and have some familiarity with that type of program. It doesn't have to be the Innovation Pathways program, but a similar sort of, almost like a work study experience. So right now, things look good in terms of our applicant pool.
Good luck.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
And thank you. Thanks for having me on tonight. I know tonight's the agenda, I'm sure, it's a big one because of the budget. So this is a very brief presentation. And the purpose of me being here, like Superintendent Angelakis said, is to just bring something to your attention that really came up for me for the first time last year in the spring, and that was managing requests from families who were really looking at class dues and having a difficult time being able to afford to pay those class dues. And I want to present the problem to you all and then make a suggestion for a policy to address this. So last year, 2022, class dues for that senior class, for the graduating class, for that year alone were $85. And just for the full picture, the class dues go toward primarily events, right? And last year it was primarily senior events because we hadn't had events before that, right? No junior prom, we didn't have the sort of traditional Canopy Lake trip and that sort of thing, all because of the pandemic. Last year, we ran into a situation where we were in, let's say, April or May, and many families hadn't paid and hadn't paid until last year. So that was a pretty significant amount of money that they needed to pay in order to fund some of these senior activities. So we're looking at $85, and then for that senior year alone. And then I think the next bullet is that for grades 9 through 11, right? So for the previous year, it's $75 for each year. So that adds up to a grand total of $310, which is a lot of money, right? And it's a lot to ask of people at the tail end of senior year when they're also looking at other costs. And I can kind of walk you through what some of those other costs are. So user fee, right? So for one season, $375 for an athlete. And I think approximately 70% of our kids play a sport, right? Prom ticket last year was $125. We don't have any ability to negotiate with like the prom vendor, right? That's a set cost and a set fee. And then also AP exams. Most of our kids take at least one AP exam. Those are $97 per exam. The College Board does offer some relief, but folks have to go about that process and apply directly to College Board to get some financial relief for the AP exam fee. Last year, 17 families reached out to me seeking financial assistance with class dues. And it felt like a lot of it was sort of word of mouth, right? People hearing that this was a thing and reaching out to me. And we were able to do this, and we used some of the metrics that DESE provides for us in order to determine whether or not people were eligible for it solely based on that information. And that cost was absorbed by what was in that class of 22 budget. But we don't have a written policy for financial assistance for class dues. So my hope here is for you to consider adopting some sort of a written policy. And I think on the next slide, we have the athletics policy. I'm sorry, the equity questions first. So when we're making decisions here, we like to try, this is something that we worked on last year, and it's something that we're using throughout the year to kind of think through our equity questions when we're making decisions.
Mr. Kohut, could I just chime in here? This is part of our core work. We has agreed district-wide that every decision we make is based on these 3 equity questions. Sorry, Mr. Kohut.
No, go ahead. No, I kind of skipped ahead on my own. So okay. There are a few more of these, but I think the equity questions that are applicable to this situation: can everyone participate? Did we leave anyone out? And what are our blind spots? And, I think in thinking through those questions, it does raise some questions, right? Is this a barrier for people, right? If they can't pay the class dues, we don't ever want to be in a situation where we say to a family, you can't attend prom because you can't pay the class dues. And do we have any blind spots in our decision making, right? Are we not considering sort of the full scope of what people can pay or contribute for the class dues? So a suggestion to you would be to develop a written policy for families that seek financial assistance specifically for class dues. Like I said, I think with the College Board, so that's like the SAT or the ACT or APs, that's something that College Board can help with. They have their own kind of mechanism to do that. This is specifically in thinking about class dues. And I think we do have something in place that we could use as a model. Athletics has the hardship waiver to assist families with user fees. There's a process. Folks can apply for that. And then it goes through central office and the business office, to work on that. And I think that would be a model for the committee to consider developing as something that we could get in our handbook. Ideally for this year, because we're now approaching the sort of senior end of the year, right, and all of the activities that are coming up, including prom. But if not for this year, then for next year.
Thank you, Mr. Kohut.
You're welcome.
I have a question. What's the difference between the $125 for the prom versus the class dues? What is the class due?
So the class dues are charged by the class itself, and those are used to offset costs. So like if we give the example of prom, right? buses, right? We have to pay for buses for the event. There's also other senior events. They do like a senior cookout. So it goes toward that. It goes to some of the other senior expenses. The prom ticket cost is set by the venue, right?
Yeah.
So venues will, whatever the cost of that is, and it's typically divided up by how many kids that we anticipate will be going. So it's, with that, we've had, with different venues over the years, have asked, and they typically can't negotiate it, which I get, right?
Yeah.
They're a business and they're in this to make money. But the class dues are used to offset some of the costs for additional events. And it's not, I guess I'm focused on senior year, but there's also, in a traditional sort of pre-pandemic high school experience, there's always an event freshman year. Historically, it was the Canopy Lake trip. And so the dues would be used for that, right? Sophomore year, a different event. Junior year, you have the junior prom, sometimes the junior show. So the fees were paid to help to contribute to the cost of some of those events.
It should also be noted that caps and gowns cannot be distributed to those students that owe money. And that includes
Right.
textbooks or back dues. So you cannot get your cap and gown for graduation if your funds aren't current, correct?
That is true, yes.
So
And
if
that's-
somebody doesn't pay their class dues, they can't get their cap and gown?
Anything they might owe, lunch money.
Yeah, lunch
if they
money
lose
or
a
books,
textbook.
Chromebook.
Well, but those seem different, because that seems like that's, so when this money is, when the class dues are paid, is that going into a school revolving account?
It goes into the class,
Student
whatever that
activity,
class
right?
is, to that class's account.
Student activity account.
Yeah, yeah.
So it should be a wash. Money in, money out.
I didn't realize that they couldn't get their cap and gown if their student activity
Yeah.
class dues were not paid. I thought it
I
was
think
just
it's
like,
all tied together, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
it does seem different. And I say this as a parent who might not be paying the closest attention, that I can't remember paying class fees.
Well, you did because they went to prom and they went, oh, whoa.
I didn't.
You did.
Oh, so
Yeah.
no, you probably haven't. So his point is you haven't as you go along. So in senior year, you'll owe the whole 310 versus
Exactly.
75,
Oh.
75, 75.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Well, I
Yes.
mean,
What
if you
you
paid
paid
it every
75,
year,
75 and 75.
then it wouldn't
Yeah.
hurt as bad. But lots of people don't. I don't think they go after you as much
Yeah, I mean,
on a
I'll
yearly
be honest
basis
with you,
as they
like,
do
I
in
don't
the
know.
senior year.
You know, and I'm speaking out of turn here because I'm not speaking as a school committee member, but as a parent, I have no idea whether or not I've paid that.
And as a former parent of a former high schooler, I knew every year I had to pay, and on top of the parking pass, which was much more expensive than Swampscott High Schools. So,
Yeah, I remember with my boys, you had to pay.
Yeah.
You pay every year, and senior year for parking. which
And is that
always-
different from the PTA fees?
Yes.
Yes.
Huh.
The PTA, or the PTF is completely up to the parent and the family.
whether you want to join or
Yeah,
not,
that's up to
that's
you.
optional.
Right, that's optional. This
But
is-
every
this is not
graduating
optional.
class of 23, class of 24, they have their own.
Right,
Their own
Pockets.
student activity.
Yeah,
right.
a fee.
Just speaking from Jesse and I can both attest to this. Being on student council, I think it becomes something that's more prominent come your junior and senior years. I don't think it's talked about and I don't want to say enough or really talked about your freshman and sophomore because it's like, well, what are you know what I mean? Especially since pre-COVID or post-COVID, sorry. Like I don't think it's just been talked about as much, and it just becomes more prominent your junior and senior. So I know that my mom didn't know about them when I was a sophomore and a freshman, so she had to pay my freshman, my sophomore, and my junior, and then this year we'll just pay my senior. But
And then you have to pay for the prom, and then, so it's like all of a sudden, it's this big snowball.
yes, yeah.
So that seems like, I get why that's.
Martha, you were going to say something?
yeah, so I was just going to say, so I appreciate the Principal Cohut bringing this. This was something that we had talked about a year ago when I was still here. There is, school committee does have a policy about charging student fees and fines. It's policy JQ. And there is a caveat in there for, students that are indigent, you waive the fees, that sort of thing. And Mr. Cohat did make reference to there is a financial assistance policy, and that does go towards a bus pass. It goes towards user fees for athletics. I do think that there's a line in there for AP tests, and then any other that they may ask for. The reason this policy doesn't necessarily apply to student activities is student activities is unique. It's funds raised by students for students.
Policy has to be.
And so that's where, so again, I'll say, so it's, the student activity accounts are set up under Mass General Law that, we have the, school committee has the purview, and it's money raised by students for students. So as Cheryl was saying to me, typically a scholarship or a financial aid may come out of a gift account, but it wouldn't necessarily come out of the school's operating budget. I would encourage the committee to look maybe to other districts or to MASC to see if other districts have a policy with regard to financial assistance for student activities, and maybe it's an amendment to policy JQ, or maybe it's an amendment to the policy for student activities.
I feel like, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, that was,
I just feel like, I feel like it's not our purview to have a policy for student activity funds. It seems like overstepping. It seems like a high school thing. And I think that the waiver, using the athletic waiver, using the athletic waiver is something you could just do. I don't think we need to give you the permission. I think this is a really important discussion with every single class and every single class advisor, we're a student organization, we're raising money, and we raise extra money so that we can cover costs for people who can't cover it. It seems like
But it comes down to that age-old question, and I apologize, Glenn was just saying lunch is currently free, which it is, but if you've watched the news, they're talking about will it continue to be free, so that's what the question he was asking. But it comes back to that age-old question when I first became superintendent about what's policy and what's procedure. If it's just a procedure that needs to be developed or a procedure that should be followed using the athletic hardship waiver, then that's the direction we could go in. We just want, I think what Mr. Cohat, and I'm speaking for him, is looking for some guidance to make those hard decisions.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is it's not, for example, we don't tell the PTFs how to operate, right? We have a procedure a policy that says we have PTFs and they have to, just be fair or whatever, right? It's a really generic policy. But we don't have policies for student activities.
Because if that were the case,
right, we would have
we're not saying in the same that, for example, with athletics, that we are as a school board, we'll say, listen, we're working towards a 50-50 split, and therefore we have these professionals who are in place to manage that budget. These are budgets that are being managed by the classes as the classes see fit. And the school committee is certainly not in the position of saying, well, listen, if you guys are going to pay for your prom out of this and you don't have enough money, then you got to have the prom in the gym. That's not for us to say.
I can see your point about building-based. I think,
no, I was just going to say,
but I will add, I think it is part of our policy to say that we want everybody to participate in all things that are part of our community. And I wonder if that's
which I feel like is part of
the equity work.
That policy does.
Right.
But that
Sorry to
policy
point at
knows. Yeah, no, that's okay. But that policy is applicable to fees that you set as a committee. You set the user fee. You set the school bus fee.
Right,
so that policy.
We're not setting this fee.
No, you're not. That's the difference. And you do have a policy. Your student activity accounts are enabled under a policy JF. So you do have a policy that allows for student activity accounts, but it doesn't dictate them.
Right.
So, and I think it's important, the one thing I will say, and then I'll turn it back to the committee, is the hard part of student activities is determining what the right amount is. Because you can't overcharge kids to subsidize others. So if it's truly $5 a child, then it's $5 a child. You can't charge 10 because you're going to have families that need assistance. You can't overcharge.
By law?
But part of what the class does is raise money for the class, right?
And they
sell
can fundraise,
sweatshirts,
certainly. It's,
they raise money, just like boosters raise money for all the bling they get,
Yeah.
right? And so it's like on,
So that account holds more than just the class dues. It also
yeah.
holds.
they could eliminate class dues altogether and fundraise out the wazoo if they wanted
Yes.
to. It's totally at their discretion.
Right, John, any thoughts?
You know, when I looked at this before the meeting, I did hear from a number of parents over the Christmas break, the holiday break, where it just seemed like the fees were coming fast and furious, you know, the athletic fees. I don't know what specific ones, but there were like 3 of them back to back to back, and it's like, ooh, you know, and I remember hearing that. So I think, you know, the concern is real. It's probably more than, you know, the 17 that the Principal Cohut referenced, but, you know, you do it, but, you know, this is what I heard. Yeah, we do it, but, you know, it was more of a timing thing.
Right, you know what's really interesting? There are definitely some school districts out there who say, you know, instead of fundraising, we are gonna charge each class member X dollars. We get away from any questions. It's gonna be, you're a freshman, it's $1,000. Pay $250 a year, pay $1,000 up front. However you want to pay, you pay. I certainly understand the equity question. You know, looking completely off the topic, looking at the athletic handbook waiver, that language probably does need to change because it does say you first have to apply for free and reduced lunch. I don't even know if that still happens anymore.
Yes, it does.
Okay, so even though everyone gets free lunch right now, there is that. Okay, that's great. I actually, you know, although I see both sides, I actually have to agree with Suzanne here. I think this is just out of our purview. I think if it was a set entity, you know, we set the fee, like we set the athletic user fee at, you know, whatever it is, $325, $375, whatever it is, then that's something that we get involved with, and I'm not even certain about that. But for something like a class trip or a class prom, that's dictated on the school level. I mean, I understand, and I will definitely support the equity behind it and how how monies are raised, but I really do believe that is up to the high school and each individual class.
So I would imagine that, especially as our district and all of the leadership in our district is working on equity and how does this impact all of our students, this is going to come up on everything, really. And it either is a place like a private school where it covers everything, but we don't have those kinds of budgets, or it's a la carte. You pay for what you want to participate in, whether it's sports or student activities, and you have to go through this process if there is hardship to help. And I think that the policy is that, you know, we work to ensure that everybody is included. That's also part of the decisions around what these organizations are opting to do. Are these choices doable for everybody? You know, when you go and you have, and I'm sorry to pick on the prom, but if you have a big fancy prom and everybody's on a coach bus, and like, these things add up. And so you have to sort of do the work as an organization, not us, but the students' organization, to say, can we do this and make sure that everybody is included? And look, I mean, we know we're about to sit here and have a pretty hard conversation about budget. We just aren't. It would be lovely if we said, everybody, don't worry about it. We'll pay for these things.
But I think we have real guidance now, and, you know, I encourage Mr. Cohart to bring it here, and having the hardship waiver for athletics is something that we could easily do to follow those guidelines and to set something up so that we ensure equity and participation.
And to be fair, they can't come at you in May of
Right.
senior year and say, I need $300.
Right.
No, I
That,
mean,
like, that should be
yeah, I
happening
mean, like,
all along.
it's still out of our purview, but that seems like a protocol thing that you could address,
But
is to make
also,
sure
the
it's paid every
takeaway from
year.
me right now is that clearly freshmen and sophomore class
Do I-
are not are not articulating.
I was going to say, don't blame it on
Ms.
a
Seibert,
subject
you're-
of one.
Well, I will say that because of COVID, see, traditionally, that would happen, right? Where there would be an event freshman year, Canopy Lake trip, right? And you need to have that $75, the dues in for Canopy Lake. That's the reason why many people would pay the dues to be able to go on the trip, right? But when those things don't happen for 3 years, and now suddenly the only event is prom,
Right.
and it's the dues over. That's why that happened. I think that's going to keep on happening until, well, maybe, moving forward with this group, maybe that won't be the case, hopefully, right? But that is going to be the case, at least for a few groups, right, where they haven't consistently been paying dues because there haven't been events to pay dues for, and families will say, "What am I paying for?"
Right.
And then when they hit senior year, they're required to pay.
Yeah,
So
well, you tell them so it's you don't pay 300 in senior year. We're
Right.
breaking it up
Yeah.
so that you.
exactly.
If I could make maybe a suggestion, is that, I know that there's a large event for 8th grade parents, before they come up here. I think that, I know the guidance department talks to the 8th grade parents. And again, you can't get everybody there. I understand that. And sometimes it's a lot of preaching to the choir. But I think during that 8th grade visitation night, there should be a table, there should be a discussion about very clearly what the next 4-year investment, and that's how I would word it, an investment in your son or daughter's
Or freshman year, you
activities.
get a bill, $75, user fee,
You're right, you could do that too.
when you're here.
Right.
And I have a huge, this is not sitting well with me, and now, and now I'm thinking, I can't believe, I thought we weren't letting kids get caps and gowns if they didn't do books and uniforms
Yeah.
and things like that, not.
Pay for the
not-
prom and
I know, I think that's
Canopy
not,
Lake.
that
Not
little piece of
student-
it's not sitting well
not
with any of
student
us.
Yeah,
activities,
I
like-
completely agree.
Like, you still get to
Because-
graduate.
But, no, but you can still graduate, but I get not being able to get your cap and gown if you haven't returned a school-related
Your
item,
books,
your books, your
your
uniform.
uniform,
But
yeah.
I don't get not being able to graduate because you haven't paid a student activity fee. And I get that everyone needs the money so that everyone has these experiences. But there are definitely kids that didn't go to any of these experiences through their whole 4
Who
years.
didn't go to prom, who didn't go to
Unfortunately. There
Canopy
are
Lake
people
or-
that didn't do it, and to force everyone to pay it doesn't sit right. And I just, thank you for telling me what policy I should know. But I was just looking at JQ, and we talk about school fees, fines, and charges, and it's pretty much about any fees or charges due to any school in the district not paid will be carried forward to the next blah, 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 and debts have to be collected, right? But it doesn't talk about
Student organizations.
student organizations. It's talking about the school as a whole, like as a school. And the student organizations, like, I agree, like, last year or the year before, last year before COVID, everyone was up in arms because Marblehead was having their prom at Fenway, right? And they had these coach buses. I can't even imagine how much their tickets were, right? And that was the year, I think that, the year before that, my daughter they had raised so much money, they got to use the extra money they had in their coffers to reduce all the prom ticket prices down to like $75 or something. I mean, it's just like up to the class, like how they want to raise money and use their funds. But I think it's like, I think Mr. Cohat has the agency to set this up however works. I just think or is a discussion with the people who are generally, the class advisors, right?
I don't think you want the school committee involved in this.
I don't-
Well, I think
do
you've
either.
given us our guidance, and I
Right.
think we know the direction to go in, and you've brought up some valid points that we'll go back and discuss. And look at this, you and I will talk with your team, and we'll figure this out. So I
And I'll pay my
appreciate,
fee.
I appreciate your input very much.
All right, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Cohat, I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I'm trying to get to my agenda.
Before you go, is there any other comment or a question regarding what Mr. Cohat and the superintendent were chatting about? From anybody?
What do you guys think?
I think that I want to look at these policies a little more closely
I just-
to make them clear that we want everyone to participate in everything.
Well, I do think we have to put our equity lens into
Yeah.
some of those policies, and that's a bigger discussion.
I mean, we say things all the time. It says, the need for, no student will be denied access to any program because of inability to pay. Like, I mean, we say that.
That's district run, right.
I think,
But
sorry, I think part of it also, and this is just to kind of maybe understand the class dues a little bit more, and class dues aren't necessarily just for prom or just for a activity. Sometimes it's to pay for other things that the seniors have to do. Like, they're a big talk right now for the senior class is how much yearbooks cost. Yearbooks were about $30,000 to $40,000. So we decided that instead of making class dues $200 to pay for that, that students will buy their own yearbooks if they choose to buy them. But part of our class dues is we have to buy, as a senior class, a certain amount of yearbooks because one goes to one library, one goes to this library, one goes to the superintendent, there's like 20 yearbooks. So class dues aren't necessarily just a student activity. Sometimes they're things that we have to purchase and we have to fund for so that everyone can be included, or because we have to do it, if that makes more sense. Like the cookout.
That seems like something we should buy.
This,
I totally agree with you. I 100%, I 100% get that this money is used for a lot of different things. I mean, I've seen it firsthand in action as a parent who was doing these things. Go ahead, Jesse.
Yeah, I was
Sorry, Glenn.
Say,
No. I mean,
Jesse, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, I agree, it shouldn't prohibit you from getting your cap and gown and letting you walk down the stage like everyone else. Because, like, being on student council the last 3 years, I'm not anymore. And, like, because I didn't know what student dues were until last year, we made it so if that you didn't pay your student dues, you couldn't attend prom, which was good for people who didn't want to go to prom,
Yep.
didn't feel the need. And people who, couldn't, but it was, I know their value just from having to repeat it to my class over and over
Yeah.
again. Like what these are actually paying for, like, our senior shirts as well and stuff like that. But I think it is important to make it so nobody's getting like punished.
Right.
right, yeah, no one's getting punished if you don't pay them, but there's something that is inevitable and we have to do
It's a lot of money.
eventually.
So it sounds like there's an opportunity, besides the no punishment, which I agree with, that, there is an opportunity for ongoing compliance or whatever you want to call it. So, people pay as you go, like every year you get the $75 bill. There's more proactive engagement on the part of
The leaders.
whether it's the high school,
Yeah.
team or whoever,
Right.
to do that. So there's not this big surprise at the end.
Right,
Yeah.
to avoid
Yeah.
that
Right.
pain at the
It
end.
sounds like there's a good opportunity there.
And you would actually collect more.
Yeah, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. I also want to just maybe take another tact is, into some of what you guys were saying, is someone may choose not to participate in a prom or an event, but at the end of the day, for what I've learned from the superintendent and from others within the buildings, is that it is a community. And as part of that community, there are some responsibilities as part of the community. Now, granted that if someone or if some family is struggling at the present time financially, I wholeheartedly agree that the school district or an entity, I guess, because I don't really know where to go from there, that no student should be left behind. I think that makes perfect sense. I think that's great. But at the same time, this is a community. And whether dues are, over 4 years or $1,200 or whatever that is, if a family can give $10, they can give $10. But I think there is maybe a happy medium. I mean, dues are important. Dues are necessary. We, as a district, unfortunately, don't have the dollars to fund these programs. I wish we did. I do. you know, and at the end of the day, it's kind of short dollars, but it's dollars we just, as you'll
Yeah, certainly
hear,
adds up.
as you'll hear shortly, is dollars that we don't have. So I think this is a great discussion. I would certainly like to add this to an upcoming meeting so we could discuss this more fully, if that's okay with everybody.
I don't think we have to in this
I
case.
don't-
I think we've
Okay.
come to
I don't think
a
so.
decision that we have our guidance from the school committee to go back and look at it. I think if anything, policy will look at the equity questions and make sure things are more articulated. But I feel like we have a direction to go
Okay.
in at the building level and definitely also look at, you know, are we definitely charging those dues in order to get their caps and gowns, and maybe rethink that. And that's something Mr. Kohat and I will work on.
Great.
Perfect.
All right, next.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kohat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item on my agenda is the North Shore Education Consortium Annual Report for 21-22. I do this obviously annually. I believe not too long ago, I presented you with the 2020-2021 Annual Report. The North Shore Education Consortium is one of our out-of-district placements. It is a collaborative, which means it's made up of many member districts. This year, I am chair of the board. This is my third year as chair of the board, and I'm just going to highlight, for those of you that may not be aware of the consortium, the various programs they have there. So on page 9, I'll go over some of the, well, first of all, I'll talk about the member districts. So we have Beverly, Danvers, Gloucester, Hamilton, Ipswich, Lynn, Lynnfield, Manchester, Essex, Marblehead, Masconomet, Nahant, North Reading, Peabody, Pentucket, Reading, Rockport, Salem, Swampscott, Tri-Town, and Triton. And so as a member district, you get, you pay a one lump fee, and you get a daily rate that's lower than non-member districts. That doesn't mean that non-member districts don't enroll in their programs, but you'll see there's a table I show you annually where one of their programs as a member district and a non-member district is compared to some of our other out-of-district placements. We tend to look at the collaborative programs before other out-of-district placements because it is more cost-friendly to the districts. But if you go to page 9, which I will go to, I want to highlight for you the programs they have. So they have the Kevin O'Grady School, which serves students ages 3 to 22 with significant developmental delays. Once I go through these programs, I did have I hope I have it with me, how many students we have in each, from Swampscott in each of the programs. Watch me lose it. Nope, I have it. The next page, on page 10, we have, you realize you're asking me to walk and chew gum at the same time.
North Shore Academy Upper School.
North Shore Academy Upper School serves students in grades 7 through 12 who struggle with social emotional issues. These are really stellar programs they run, and I just couldn't be prouder to be the chairman of the board again. We'll go to page 12, the North Shore Academy Lower School, which serves students in K to 6 with the social, emotional, and psychological programs. They have a Vocational Academy in Topsfield, which is on page 13. We don't currently have anybody enrolled in the Vocational Academy. And then we have the North Shore Recovery High School, which has been in the news a lot for tragic reasons that they tend to have lost a lot of students because this is a substance abuse program and those who struggle with substance abuse. So that is another program they have. They also have transition programs at Salem State, but in terms of our Swampscott enrollment and where we have students, we have one student at Recovery High, we have one student at the Lower Academy, so K to 6 social emotional. We have 7 students at the Upper Academy, 7 through 12 social emotional, and we have 4 students at the Kevin O'Grady. So we have a total of 13 students at the consortium. One of the other highlights I wanted to show you. I'll show you how we compare to our member districts. That is on page, in terms of enrollment. Obviously, Lynn and Peabody and Salem, it's actually on page 7. Let me go back, I apologize. There is a bar graph that shows the number of students from each of the districts, right here. So if you look at the member districts, you can see Peabody, Lynn, Salem used to have many more, but if you look at Beverly and Danvers, they're high as well. So,
But they're cities.
right, they absolutely are, but just stellar programs. I feel like you'll have questions. Let me just show you the last page that I wanted to share with you, and certainly you can peruse this at your own leisure. This is page 19, and this shows just a comparison of one of their programs and the cost from member districts, right here. So, the cost effectiveness of the programs and services at the Kevin O'Grady, if you're a member school, the daily rate is $456. If you're a non-member district, it's $549. But what's listed below that are some other out-of-district placements that show you their daily rates. So this is really cost-effective for
Yeah,
districts.
$500 times 180.
When we talk about our district placements and our special education costs, this is an example of another one here is the North Shore Academy Topsfield Vocational member, $253 a day. If you're a non-member, it's $302. But then if you were to look at these other, look at the Lighthouse School at $613 a day. These are other options. So I just highlight this as, you know, it is very, and I should know this answer, and I don't want to throw it to Ms. Seibert. I don't remember what the member fee is.
$10,000.
I was going to say 10, but I thought it's been 10 for quite a while. So for $10,000.
Seems like a bargain.
Right. I will say that Fran Rosenberg is the executive director. She's been there for a number of years. Prior to her arrival, they were in fiscal disarray. They're not, but they struggle with the same things we do: facilities issues, roofs blowing off, you know, loss of or flooding. But it's really interesting for me to sit on their school committee or their board and be her supervisor. It's a very different role, but I enjoy working with Fran. I believe in the collaborative, and they just submit an annual report. And I've said this in the past, but I'll say it for anybody new that's listening, that I love how she presents her annual report, but this is a requirement for DESE with collaboratives. We have our own format that's required by the town, and it's much more boring with less pictures and things. But I encourage you to take a look through it and really understand that this is where we try to send some of our students. They're wonderful programs, but they struggle with, you know, collective bargaining with their units as much as we do. But it's interesting for me to sit on the other side of the table when it comes to being chair of the board.
Thank you, Superintendent. Any questions, comments?
So, cost-wise, how has this grown on their daily rates? How, what percentage did they grow last year?
I
Not,
want to say we budget 3%.
not what our contribution is, but how much it costs to send. So in other words, did their budget grow by 5%? I know that Essex Tech, I can't pull it off the top of my head, but I remember when we went through the cherry sheet with Sean, he pointed out some number that was significantly over our growth rate for Essex Tech. I'm wondering what the growth rate is here as well as for.
The tuition increases year over year have been very nominal. I want to say they've been 3%, maybe. I know, and Cheryl and I were just discussing, it's been $10,000 a year. There was a COVID assessment a year ago that we used ESSER funds to help pay for, because that was kind of a one-time thing.
That makes sense.
But they typically, they have not raised their fees anywhere near what OSD is going to do next year, which is 14%.
We actually just had a
OSD.
finance meeting. We just had a finance meeting, but go ahead, do you want to?
What's OSD?
Operational Services Division, which oversees the tuition for all of the other out-of-district placements, private schools, like
I was gonna
Cornell
ask.
Marks and.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I was going to ask
Yeah.
the exact question, so Superintendent, you were going to say something?
I was just gonna say that we had a finance committee meeting this morning, a subcommittee meeting, and as chair, I attend all the subcommittee meetings. And we were actually looking at FY '23 and trying to get wrap our heads around FY '23. And looking ahead to FY '24, that conversation will start after next week's board meeting. But having just, or almost settled the teacher's contract there, they were looking at 4%. But if the OSD rate of 14% happens, then they're going to be higher. And the only other thing I wanted to say is all of the superintendents, this is, I think, the only collaborative that's board is made up of superintendents. Some of the collaboratives have school committee members as well. I think it's really important to have the superintendents at the table. I was going somewhere with that and I completely derailed. I think.
Growth.
In terms of the COVID assessment, it was really important to us, knowing that a collaborative didn't get any of the access to any of the funds that the school districts did. They didn't have access to the ESSER. They didn't have access to what we had. They did not force that assessment on us. We came to an agreement of what we felt we should give in order to support this collaborative.
That if they were in
Right.
our district,
Right.
they would
Right.
have those
So-
benefits.
Right. Anybody else?
Anyone else?
I'll be very curious to see, once we kind of can line all that up, especially with the OSD hikes, you know, that education is expensive and growth, it's not necessarily, you know, it's not, you can't put this fake cap on it and expect to do anything but suffer.
I mean, I will just say that for the school districts and for the parents involved and who go to the consortium, it's an absolute godsend. And for the school districts, it's, if you look at some of these numbers, it would almost be an untenable number if the consortium didn't exist. So I think anything we not only we as us here, but other school committees throughout, you know, the consortium area can do to make sure that it is a school that is sound financially and otherwise, I think is just very important.
Yeah, that's not really my point, though. This isn't a question of whether or not we support them, because we do,
Right, of course.
obviously. It really is more of a, how is it that all of the districts that we are working with are growing at X number of rate, and we are being held to a 2.2 rate? And so by default, when costs go up, and you're not rising with that tide, you're essentially facing cuts.
I agree.
Well, that ties into.
Wait, can I ask?
Thanks.
Wait, I just.
Yeah, Suzanne,
Messenger?
go ahead.
I know, sorry. I have just, every time you do this NEC thing, it's really impressive, right? But then it also gets me thinking about the Essex. And I know we're supposed to get report, the same sort of report from Essex. And I know also we need a new Essex rep.
We do?
Yes, because.
It'd be nice if they told us that.
Alice McDonald's done, right?
I have never received an annual report from Essex.
I
I
know,
was gonna say,
but-
we've never,
But I think like our representative is supposed to.
I've never
come
even
here.
spoken to our school committee member.
Yeah.
I know, I
Um,
think
It goes-
Glenn, I think we have to reach out, I think the
Okay.
town moderator
The
is
town
supposed to.
moderator.
They are
Is
supposed
supposed
to
to appoint someone, and so we should maybe get a list of kids that are there, because maybe, I mean, it doesn't have to be the parent of a current student, I'm sure. It just has to be someone who's interested
Okay.
in representing us, but I think that.
I feel disconnected to what's going on with
Yeah.
our
I
students.
was just
especially
gonna use
when
the
you
same
just
word.
said
There's been
how
a huge
much
disconnect.
their growth,
Yeah, like if they grow 10%,
like, it's kind of, I like.
we have no control
Yeah,
over
they just
that.
charge us
But
10%,
we certainly
and
have a
it's-
town administrator who says, well, they're growing at 10%, so we got to hold everybody else's
I
costs.
would also like to know what
And 10% is a made-up number.
Yeah, I know, what responsibilities that school committee member has. Are they supposed to come quarterly to the school committee member and report out the school committee meetings? I'm not clear on what their role is in terms of how they report out to this.
I don't think
committee.
any of us are.
Every year when you do this, I think,
Yeah,
like, okay, let's remember
So
that.
I will reach out to the moderator and others to try to get our hands wrapped around this. Before we move on, I just do want to say regarding this budget presentation today and next week. I hope, and I know there's no one from the public out there.
There's
but-
three now.
Oh, there is.
don't-
All right, great. I do want to make everybody really clear that the numbers that are going to be discussed are real, are accurate, and we will disclose those numbers and what we are looking at clearly and succinctly. Some people may not like those numbers, people may question those numbers, but the numbers are what the numbers are. And if you and the public out there want to become involved, this is the time. This is the time to make your voice heard about where your tax dollars are going. Because you may be as unhappy as we are about what is about to take place. With that, the floor is yours.
Okay. Are you going to pull up the presentation for me, Superintendent?
Who's the floors? Who's the floors? Who's?
Well, I'm so fortunate to have two directors of finance sitting here tonight, Martha Seibert and Cheryl Stella. And so when the chair says that these numbers are accurate, the three of us spent quite a bit of time reviewing this.
I would hope there was nothing, like, why would that be in question?
I'm tongue in cheek that there's been
Okay.
two of them looking at it,
Okay.
but no, I'm totally being tongue in cheek. I would say, we have said from the get-go, since Ms. Seibert came on board, this is the best and clearest and most, and easiest budget to understand. Anyway,
So thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to come and present the budget. As you know, when I tendered my resignation back in September, I committed to developing the budget. Cheryl and I have been working collaboratively since you announced her, and we've met a number of times. And so this is a good transition time. She's getting familiar with the budget files. Superintendent obviously has been familiar with the budget files because we've been using them for about 4 years now. So without further ado, we'll dive into the budget. I wanted to take a look back with the committee just to kind of set the stage for why we find ourselves where we are at this point in time. Back in FY21, when we were developing the budget for fiscal 21, which was, June of 2020 to July 1st of 2020 to June of 2021, so the fiscal 21 budget. Town meeting was delayed that year because there was a lot of uncertainty. The state hadn't passed a budget yet because of the pandemic. We had just come out of being remote since, March 13th, I think. So we had a lot of savings as a result of that in FY20. And looking in FY21, we were, at the request of the town, we were asked to implement a $381,000 budget reduction, which we did, because we weren't incurring expenses for transportation and for substitute teachers and for consumables, because for a good part of the year, we were hybrid, where we weren't even here one day a week. A lot of families elected to be remote for a good portion of the year. So there were a lot of things that contributed to our ability to sustain what ultimately became a $351,000 budget reduction. But when FY22's budget was developed, that $351,000 was never added back into our budget. So it became a permanent reduction. At the same time, there was a change in capital funding, which I know this committee is well versed in, that eliminated funding for school technology, yet no money was added back to the school's operating budget to fund technology replenishment. So those two key factors that happened in FY21 have compounded over the years.
So just to be clear, that second sentence that says annual replenishment of $200,000, that was absorbed by our budget? That we found the dollars to do that, or they did not fund the 200?
So
Both.
this is where we were able to leverage COVID and remote access grants and ESSER
Okay.
money to fund that for a number of years. But those funds are depleted and
So
running out.
annual replenishment should have been $200,000?
It should have been.
Right.
Looking at FY '22, we did not have a 2% growth in FY '22. We had a 1.37% growth, plus new growth of 0.88. We did reduce our budget by $180,000, but we really didn't. We used ESSER funds to cover those things. That reduction, and Cheryl and I have had conversations about it, and I've had conversations with Amy Sarro about it. That reduction of $180,000 was a little bit different than the request the year before, $351. And it's different in that that $180,000 reduction was because of exactly what Ms. O'Connor said. The Essex Tech and the other assessments that the town pays for out of their budgets have been growing. And that year, it grew by $180,000. And so it was agreed that we would absorb it out of ours. And so that expense still remains on the town side. And so I look at that 180 as that is another permanent reduction, but I know that reduction was made because there was an expense, a dollar for dollar expense that's on the town books that they had to absorb. Cut to FY '23, we stayed within the recommended guidance of 2.88. We've incurred staffing challenges all year. The current labor market is difficult to hire and retain for many positions. We're still working on.
Can I jump in here?
Of course.
I want to split hairs a little bit. So on this bullet that says FY '22, the school department reduced the FY '22 budget by $180,000. That's actually not true. It's that our budget stayed the same, but the town allocation was reduced by $180,000.
No, we reduced our operating budget by $180,000 and moved the expenses that would have paid for that 180 onto a grant.
Okay, so we didn't,
It's the FY '23.
right, but, so we still spent that money?
We
like that-
did still spend
Like that
it,
was
which is
still the
why
cost of
We had
education?
the discrepancy last year that money should have been restored. We just had other resources
Yep, that we
available
could
to
rely
us.
on.
Right, exactly.
Yep, okay. Sorry, I'm being,
Oh,
I just
no.
want to be like really precise about
You
this.
want to understand?
No, I appreciate the clarifying question and the specificity.
Okay.
I tried to make these bullet points.
No, I know,
concise.
I get it. And, you know, it's like we talk about it so much, but it's, I just want to be really,
Yeah, and we're still, and this is where, now that Cheryl's on board, we are still working on the projection for FY '23, and I expect to have a projection for the committee at a future meeting on where we are for FY '23, how we're tracking to our current budget. And then, obviously, tonight we're here to talk about the FY '24 budget. And so it stays within, the budget that's being presented is still within guidance from the town manager. It still does not have technology replenishment in it. And I did not get an updated number from Ms. Mackie Knowles. I want to say that when I looked at the plan, for some reason, $200,000 is standing out in my mind as this year's replenishment cycle. Last year's was 180, this year's was 200. I think it was 200 for a few years before it bumped up to 225. So I just put in a range of 180 to $200,000. Moving on to slide 3. This is a kind of a lay of the land of what our budgets have been for the last few years. At the FY '22 approved budget from the town general fund was $29.3 million. The FY '23 approved budget had an increase of $846,000 to $30,222,000. And as you can see, the FY '24 recommended budget with a 2.6, almost 2.59% increase of $783,000 will bring us to $31,006,033 this year. The reason the number looks like it's going down year over year is that $425,000 of new growth. So the 2.88 is going to get smaller
Right.
as we go out into the future, because 425,000 over the budget it diminishes over time. So this year, it wasn't 2.88 growth, it was 2.6 growth. And next year, it'll probably be 2.5 growth, and it'll continue to go down. As you know, we have a negotiated contract with Nahat for tuition for their kiddos that join us in 7th grade. That is going up by 2.5%, as negotiated by the committee a few years ago. And right now, we still have a few students who are coming in for special education in district programs, and that is forecasted to be about $85,000 for next year as well. So this budget, as presented, stays within the town manager's recommended 2%
Sorry,
growth. I'm sorry?
I'm sorry.
Did I say something?
No, I was
Oh, okay.
moving the slides.
It meets all obligations and provides for personnel salary increases, and non-resident tuition and revolving funds also are all set too. So you can go on to the next one now. So the FY '24 budget, it does increase our overall budget by 800 and, oh geez, I didn't update that, did I? Sorry, it should say 783,000. Oh, no, it is right, sorry. I shouldn't
That's
doubt
the
myself.
total, no.
It's the total, I know, I'm looking at the previous slide, I'm like, no, it's only going up by 783. It's our overall increase is $823,000. Really, this budget, and there's more work to do with the superintendent and staff and leadership team. It reprioritizes staff to increase areas of greatest needs. It keeps class sizes in desirable ranges and sustains our strong and effective programmings. The budget drivers are obviously the salaries and benefit obligations to our employees. We're using an increased use of circuit breaker funds this year of $735,000 over our award to help balance the budget, and we're maintaining revolving offsets at $75,000. That $75,000 is from the after-school program from the YMCA. There's obviously an increase in special education, including transportation and staffing and out-of-district tuitions.
Can I ask a question, please?
Sure.
So you say increased use of circuit breaker funds of $735,000 and change over estimated award. Can you go into a little bit more detail?
There's a slide further in the presentation that
I'll
will
wait.
kind of give more
Thank you.
color to that, if
Perfect.
you don't mind waiting.
Yeah, absolutely.
So tonight, we're going to go over, actually, I should have updated this one too, sorry. We're going to go over all the cost centers tonight because I think that we can do it, given that we're the only thing on the menu. So next week, we'll cover grants and revolving funds, and then and next week will be the public hearing. And then on February 9th, the school committee will vote the budget and we'll submit it to the town administrator. When school committee votes the budget in early February, I know you all know this is for people who may be watching at home. When school committee votes the budget in early February, it becomes the town administrator's budget. They will bake it in with the town's budget and present a balanced budget to finance committee in March. And then town meeting will vote the overall budget at their meeting in May. Again, and I appreciate the compliment earlier at the start of the meeting. When I got here in 2018, I talked with the superintendent about it and the chair then about implementing a cost center structure. It just found it easier for me to explain the budget to people, and I think people understand how we spend our money more easily when you think about it in terms of cost centers: administration, general education, special education, facilities, and then district-wide, which includes health services, athletics, and technology. And so that was adopted in FY20, and the school committee votes the budget by cost center. On slide 7, this is the cost centers presented with the actuals from FY20 through unaudited FY22. The audit's ongoing. The approved budget for FY23 and the recommended budget for FY24. The administrative cost center right now has a placeholder of a reduction of $675,000 to balance the budget. Budget right now funds all salary and benefit obligations to employees per the collective bargaining agreements, and non-salary alliance, with few exceptions, are level funded.
I just want to reiterate that number.
Wait,
The work that Ms. Steller and myself and the leadership team have to do between now and town meeting is to come up with $675,000 in reductions,
Cuts.
cuts, on top of the significant number of $735,000 that we're dipping into circuit breaker. And I know Ms. Seibert said she'll get to what that entails, but we're looking at 1.2. So just keep that number in mind.
So you and your team are sitting down over the next month and
Yes.
coming up with $675,000.
Yes, and I want to say publicly, because if there are any teachers watching, whether on one of the platforms, I have said to whatever group's been in front of me since we've had these numbers that there is no secret. Years ago, we looked at the elementary schools, and we reduced from 8 sections across the district to 7. Then, when working with Ms. Seibert, we hired a consultant to look at the middle school and high school schedules. And you know that last year, we targeted high school in terms of reductions. I have been working very closely since October with Mr. Kalishman, who's here, and his assistant principal, Ms. Zotto, to really start heavy, deep discussions about the middle school. The middle school schedule, the recommendations that came out of the DMG study. You know, do we have to, the team model at the middle school has always been the way we've done things, but we don't have the luxury of doing things the way we've always done things now. And so we're tossing around ideas of how do we keep our middle school services as they are, but also perhaps look at a different model. And so it's not just the 3 of us working in isolation. Obviously, Ms. Stella will be involved in those conversations, and our last meeting included our Director of Teaching and Learning, Dr. Bacon, and our Assistant Superintendent of Student Services, Ms. Raymond, so they are involved in those conversations as well. I also was meeting with a high school group yesterday with Mr. Kohut, and I was explaining to them, because they were talking about reductions, and I encouraged them all to attend either via Zoom or watch it on a platform, social media platform, that doesn't mean we're not looking at high school and elementary school as well. Every single year, as Ms. Seibert said, we look at efficiencies. We look at programs. We look at staffing. So, you know, it took me my 9 years in this seat to recognize I didn't need to have those reductions done by tonight, but there's going to be a lot of work that happens in the next 6 weeks.
Except that we are sort of backing into
We are
to
backing
it.
into
You're-
it, but there's
rather than-
no way.
Right, but rather than looking at the programs and designing them as you need, you're looking at them and designing them to back into
A
The
number.
number that's
number.
already given to
Absolutely.
you.
that somebody has said, this is your number.
Exactly.
But we're not ever a part of determining that number, and we're never really given a good explanation of where that number comes from and why it never changes. Why is it 2 plus $400,000? Why does that $400,000 never change? Why does that number never change? Why did our houses all get assessed of 18%?
These are
But
rhetorical
we can't
questions,
get,
right?
I mean, no, I don't expect you to
rhetorical
answer it. I'm trying to just
No, I know. You have questions. And you're
vent
airing
to
your
the
questions.
committee that this happens every year. We don't ever make a budget. We never make our budget the way we need our programs to be. We're, to your point, always backing into the town's number.
Well, the other conversation I've had repeatedly, and I've said to some of you individually, is I understand for town meeting members and maybe town hall employees that they can pull up our enrollment numbers. And our enrollment numbers have changed. They have dropped. But so has every other district across the Commonwealth, whether more people are homeschooling or they transferred their children to private school during COVID because those private schools were open full-time. My caution to all of those that say, well, I can see you've lost 75 to 100 kids at such and such a level. We've also been through 2.5 years of the pandemic, and you cannot equate enrollment numbers with needs of students. What these students have faced in the last several years in terms of socialization, mental health, it is not just talk, it's the reality of it. So you can't say you've lost 75 students, therefore your reduction of FTEs should be this, because the needs and positions are different. And I have cautioned the town administrator, I have cautioned at Tri-Chair that you can't just say, look at a number and say, okay, so this should allow you to cut so many FTEs. It doesn't work that way.
No, I mean, the entire population of Massachusetts has gone down, but I don't think the state budget has gone down, right? So,
Well, but also to boot, I mean, in the same way that we talk about the money that we get from the Nahant tuition, you know, that if those 100 kids were to leave, you don't cut FTEs because that's spread out over, well, 5 grades. Sorry, my math. So it's the same thing. It's, you know, when you look at the number, that number is down, but it's spread out over 13 grades. 14, really, if you count.
I'm sorry, I derailed.
No, I appreciate everything you say, and you're exactly right, that there definitely are efficiencies that can be gained. Make no question about it.
Which is
There are
smart.
There are efficiencies that can be gained, but this is, as we said before, the last few years, this feels like it's addition by subtraction. That's there's no other way to say it. Yes, our budget is growing, but it's addition by subtraction.
And if every year we make those, we analyze the efficiencies we can make.
So we're pretty lean at this
But-
point, right?
But we
But
do
the
do
money
that.
that we made, that we might gain from those efficiencies, we're not even touching technology. Like, it would go someplace else. We have
I mean,
needs.
that's the thing is that, you know, the big buzzword is zero-based budgeting. You're already doing that. So, you know, that's not like something to hang your hat on. That's what you do.
Well, I will say, and Ms. Stella and I spoke about it earlier today, you know, in last year's budget, I made a calculated risk of reducing unemployment expense because it had been budgeted at you know, almost $100,000 when I got here, and no claims. Certainly the COVID year, there was a lot of claims, but there's also a lot of fraud. And so I reduced it to what I think I reduced it to maybe 50,000 this year. I reduced it to 30,000 this year. We've already paid out over $50,000 of claims.
Fabulous.
So it's, you know,
Yeah, sometimes.
I don't know what else to say,
you
other
gotta
than it's a
think-
calculated risk.
Yeah.
You know, you have 5 years worth of data that supports that it's not going to be that bad. We've no reason to think that it's going to be that bad. And,
Like
it
snowstorms.
was. Yeah.
So, Ms. Hubbard, why don't you continue?
Sure. So just for full disclosure, I did not change these charts for the fact that the $675,000 was put in the administrative cost center. So I assumed that money is coming out of general ed for the purpose of this chart, because if I did that, the administrative cost center would look like it's 1% of the budget, and it's really not. So I didn't want to artificially deflate it. So this is pretty standard, I would say. You know, when you look at you know, the per pupil expenditure, 4% for administration is pretty consistent
The key's
with
not
other
coming up
commonwealths.
here.
What's the matter?
The key is not coming up on
Oh.
the slide. It's very
Oh,
strange.
that's
that
the
it's
wrong
on
the
slide.
handout,
Yeah.
so.
Oh, that's weird. It's in the present.
Yeah,
That's
it's in
really
the-
strange.
It was in, yeah,
Yeah, it's in the slide. It's in the
it's in the
printout, though.
printout. It's so funny.
Okay, sorry about that.
That's okay.
The administrative cost center is about 4% of our overall budget. As you would expect, general education and special education are 49% and 34% respectively. School facilities is 8%, and district-wide programs is 5%. The next slide really speaks to to what we all know. School education is a labor-intensive business, if you want to call it a business, and so our compensation expense is 83% of our overall budget. And about 17% is our non-comp expense. The next slide is now we're getting into specific cost centers. So the administrative cost center, we present it this way, so this is consistent with how DESE has us report it on our end-of-year report. They have 6 categories: professional salaries, clerical, other salaries, contracted services, supplies and materials, and other expenses. So you'll see each cost center presented this way. Again, there's a historical, 3 years of historical data, the current year budget, and the recommended budget for FY24. Again, you can see very clearly that the recommended budget for FY24 has a negative $675,000 placeholder. I put it here because we were not really sure where those identified cuts are going to come from, and it just seemed easier for presentation purposes to include it in the administrative cost center.
We all agreed, so.
Yeah. The next slide presents in more DESE detail, so by DESE clarification on how we reported on the end-of-year report. Most lines, as you can see, have been level funded. There is a switch where you can see there's a reduction to the business office and an increase to the human resources office. That's where we have been without a payroll coordinator since February of 2022. 2022. We hired someone. They joined us on Monday, so we're very excited about that. We are a small district, and so payroll is biweekly, every other week, and we initially went out to market to try and find a part-time payroll person, and that didn't really reap any candidates that we wanted. And so we went back out to market and posted as a 1.0 position, part-time HR admin support and part-time payroll. So it's a 1.0 position that's being split between the HR department and finance. So that's where you see the split there. And then you can see, obviously, the placeholder reduction for $675,000. I did reduce the school committee's budget line by $9,000. That may be too much, but I think that that's enough to cover your MASC dues and a few other things for the year. The next cost center is general education. You can see professional salaries are going up by $494,000. There are 48 staff that are stepping, and there are a number of staff that are lane changing. Clerical salaries are increasing. That's a function of step and COLA for our clerical staff. Other salaries are increased. That's a function of positions that were eliminated in FY23 but were restored in FY24. So you can see that's going up by $41,000. The by cost center line for general education, again, you can see most things are level funded, with the exception of salary lines. That's really where you can see the increases. You can see there's a decrease in the substitute line. That really is a function of some supplemental building-based subs that were put in place in FY23 that are not being carried into FY24. You can see that there's an increase in the guidance. We have one guidance position that has been funded by ESSER 2, and ESSER 2 will be fully spent by the end of this year. And so it was always the plan to bring those positions back onto the operating budget. There were very few positions identified, and I'll go into that more detail next week at the grant presentation. But we were very strategic with how we used our ESSER funds, and there were very few positions that needed to come back onto the operating budget. The guidance counselor was one of them. The next slide is our enrollment for special education and district programs. This data was provided by Mrs. Raymond. As you all know, we run a number of in-district programs for our students on IEPs. This is really to keep them in the least restrictive environment. It's in our best interest and our students and families to keep students when we can in district, when we can meet their educational needs. And this is our enrollment for the current year across grade level and across schools. I don't know if there are any questions on this slide or not. The numbers for Strive, because I actually reached out to Mrs. Raymond, because we have no one in Strive, and she said the numbers were so low that they were absorbed into a different class.
This shouldn't come as a surprise. We've had this slide year after year about the programs. And again, just as a reminder, the more we build programs and have cohorts of students within district, we can keep our kids in their neighborhood or community versus sending them to out of district. And so Mrs. Raymond does an outstanding job at, when there's a cohort, developing a program in district.
For special education, again, you can see there's a $520,000 increase year over year for professional salaries. That's a function of lane changes and 31 staff that are stepping. There are also a couple of supplemental special education positions that were created this year to meet student need and IEP needs. Other salaries is increasing. That's a function of a couple of supplemental positions in FY23 that are carrying into FY24. Again, I think the superintendent said it very clearly, and it's worth repeating. Enrollment does not equal student needs. Mm-hmm. And it's really worth repeating. Enrollment does not equal student needs, and you can see it very clearly on this tab. Contracted services, there's a decrease in contracted services because the increases in transportation and out-of-district tuition was offset by the significant increase in use of circuit breaker.
How many salaried positions were added in special education?
I believe there were 2, possibly a third. Again, the chart that details the way we report to DESE. As you can see, most things are level funded, with the exception of salary lines. It's worth talking about the tuition lines down at the bottom of the page. You can see we're going from 1.6 million of circuit breaker to 1.7 next year, and there's another chart further in here that will go into more detail on that. Again, 31 staff are stepping. We are decreasing contracted services because we've added a staff for OTPT speech. We did increase the number of support staff. Trying to look and see what else. I think that's about it for this one. I think the circuit breaker slide is the next one. Yeah. So circuit breaker is the fund that it's a state grant that we get annually. We submit a claim. They take, I want to say, is it $48,000? So every dollar over $48,000 that we spend, we get reimbursed, depending on how the state funds it. We assume it's going to fund it at 72%. One year they did fund it at 75%, we'll see. So that's money that we get back in our claim. So the money that we get for next year, for FY24, will be based on our FY23 claim. So our expenses from this year are going to drive what we get next year for our claim. Over time, from FY20 to FY24, you can see what our circuit breaker award was. You can see how it's going up exponentially year after year. There's a line in here that shows what we've spent. So focusing on FY23, we carried forward $1.196 million of circuit breaker funds that were available for this year. Our circuit breaker award this year is $1.4 million. We budgeted to use $1.2 million. We also budgeted to use an additional $365 this year. So that means our total circuit breaker budget use of funds is 1.6, meaning we'll carry forward 1.3. So the difference to the two numbers to look at here are the $1.34,000 or $1,034,000 that we're carrying forward, and the $1,440,000 award. So we're no longer carrying forward a year's worth of circuit breaker. So we're carrying forward $1,034,000. We're estimating, based on the student population and what we think our claim will be, that we're estimating our award for next year will be $1.5 million. We have to use the $1,034,000 that we carry forward, because you can only carry forward a year. So we have to use the $1,034,000 in its entirety next year. And to balance the budget, we're going to use an additional $735,000. Part of the need for this is our tuitions, as I mentioned earlier, our tuitions for out-of-district placements, OSD placements, they've petitioned and it has been approved to go up 14% next year. So those tuitions normally go up anywhere from 2 to 3% year over year. They don't normally get that kind of an increase unless there's a programmatic change. There is no programmatic change. They just petitioned OSD because their costs are going up as well, and so they couldn't manage their schools and their program and their staffing on only a 3% growth.
So in lay people's terms, give me years to understand it. No, instead of carrying forward the FY23 full claim of 1.538, we're looking at 802.
Correct.
So,
So,
can I ask a question?
after me, please. So, two things come to mind.
Don't look at me.
Two things come to mind. What happens if we run out of money?
I'm going to let Cheryl answer that one because Cheryl was on the town side of government as well, and she may know better. But
So, Cheryl, we run out of money. Okay? We run out of the 802,000. which it's been a long time since we've had that little dollars. What happens? Since by law, we have to educate the student?
So depending on how much money you need, you have two options. You can go to Finance Committee and ask for a reserve fund transfer.
Are you talking into a microphone?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Sorry.
We're sharing it, sorry.
So depending on the dollar amount, you could go to them and ask for a reserve fund transfer, or you would have to go to town meeting and ask for an additional appropriation.
Okay, so just in case you didn't hear, if, and I really don't think it's an if, I think it's a when
I think it's a win.
it happens, we would have to go back to the town meeting, and say, we have students who we cannot educate. By law, we must educate these students. Pay the bill. Am I accurate with that assessment?
Yes.
So to dovetail off of this.
Sure.
What we know is that best practice is that you keep a year's worth,
Correct.
because that is fiscal responsibility. What the town administrator would like to see is that we spend this money down. I don't know if that's.
I mean, he said it.
That is correct.
He
That is,
said it.
So
that is
he would-
a
So he would like to see
specific
that debt
voting
spent
statement.
down so that we do not have these monies in reserve. So let's, to play the game that the superintendent and I play often, which is worst case scenario, we don't have this money. We know by law that we have to spend this money on these students because they are protected in a way that regular ed students are not protected. So, do we just say, okay, spend the money down, and we'll see you finance committee, we'll see you board admin, all of these people who don't have to worry about these things right now because you're worrying about it and you're worrying about it.
Can I say something?
Yeah,
to that
please.
point? So I agree with you. It's absolutely best practice for any community similar to Swampscott and their demographics to 100% keep a full balance. In Ipswich, we carry forward our full balance. In addition, we also had a special education stabilization fund on top of that. And so my concern, if that happened, right, and that you spent this balance down, okay, a new family moves in, it's an expensive residential treatment, you don't have the funding. You have to go to town meeting and explain that, and everyone will know, in a town this size, who that kid is.
Yeah.
And who that family is.
And
We
that
have
Privacy is
talked about that.
completely not
Yeah.
protected.
Correct.
Yes.
And that, I don't think, is something anyone would want to happen to a family.
So I can say how I got involved in this whole mishigas back in 2003, 2002. There was a school committee meeting that we attended. We were asked to attend by then Superintendent.
Doesn't matter.
Oh, boy, what was his? He then went to the Consortium, actually, and ran it there. I'm sorry, I forget his name. And he asked us to go because there was going to be, debate at that time was not nearly as thoughtful as it is now. And someone made a specific comment about a student who was clearly about our family. And that's what led to quite a comment from both of my son's parents. That's what got me involved. Part of me wants to say, you know what, let's give the.
Like, if that's the town that
give
we
him what
want to
he
be.
wants.
Yeah,
We're gonna,
is that the town
we are
we're
gonna
in?
spend it down, and if we have to go to 10 special town meetings, okay. I don't believe that's the appropriate thing to do, but it's certainly something to do.
It would solve our $675,000
Because-
deficit.
What's the situation with the special ed reserve?
Well, there isn't one currently.
No. Right.
I don't even know if there's a warrant article for it
There
or
Well, I'm
not.
just, I mean, if we were to ever spend this down, like, the only way to be responsible is to have this in a special ed reserve account.
in addition to not spending it down.
Right, but.
That you have
but-
both.
But if we ever, if we were put in the position to spend this money, we should have it in reserves already
Someplace.
for us to not have to go specifically ask for it for one kid or for something. It's just
Yeah.
ours and we can access it with, like, quietly and quickly, sort of.
So I
but
know
it's-
that there were conversations at the last tri-chair meeting that I was fortunate enough to attend. And I do know that there's ongoing discussions about establishing a circuit breaker fund, or not.
But that's been,
excuse
this
me,
has
a
been
special
3 years.
education
No, no,
fund.
no, no, it's been 6 years. From the day the town administrator came to
Yeah.
Swampscott, we've talked about it, and at that time, we were talking about, well, what are the guidelines? We looked at Marblehead and the way that they do it, and they had a process, like, you spend down your stabilization, you spend down your circuit breaker, you do this, you do that. So it's been a 6-year circular conversation that has not gone anywhere, and it's very, very frustrating.
So, you know what's really interesting, and Suzanne, I know exactly, I know where you're going, is that so the circuit breaker is, I'm sorry,
The remainder would be, going into next year would be 802 versus 1.5.
okay, so if we had $1.5 million in a stabilization fund, then I think that's the way to go. But I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong for those of us who were sitting around the table that day, that they were talking tiny dollars to
Oh.
start a stabilization.
You're
Yeah, the
talking about a couple of
stabilization fund that they
$100,000.
funded, I don't remember what it was for, it was like
Couple.
Well, I think it was like starting with 100. and-
100,000 and then working our way.
But like.
And I
that's
believe
not
that was
even-
coming out of our
but
budget.
that's
by
not
the way,
even the,
I
but
just
that's
said.
not even the point, because the thing is that you have that stabilization account
Yep.
on top of a circuit breaker.
Correct, correct. And see, to me, there's really two ways to handle this, and this is just me, and I would love everyone's debate. We could go, as Amy has suggested, you spend it down. You know what? We'll cover everything, we'll spend it down, you have a couple $100,000 left in circuit breaker, which will last a month or two, and then we go to town meeting. The other alternative is, we're not touching circuit breaker. We cut the budget by $1.3 million, plus 10%. Don't forget, we haven't even had that conversation about what the town administrator asked at the last tri-chair meeting. And let's try to run a district, less 1.3 million.
I guess I look at this and I say, as school committee members, we have fiduciary responsibility.
Right.
It is our role to oversee budget. And like, if we just say, okay, we'll do what you want, town, we'll spend all this money down, and we'll be that kind of town where you have to go and stand on town floor and know exactly who you're spending money to support, invade everybody's privacy.
Always be behind on our bills and just asking every May.
Yeah, and whose fault's that gonna be when we have to go to town meeting?
Exactly.
And they ask, why are you
Why didn't you
budgeting
manage this,
incorrectly
why
every
didn't you
year?
manage this properly?
Right.
I would suggest we allow Ms. Seibert to finish the presentation, and then we have an overall.
Okay.
I think
Okay.
we've kind of.
Yeah. No, that's fine.
She's like, yeah.
No, I think this was necessary conversation, but I want to come back to it, and it will give the committee time to think about next steps, I guess.
Yeah, and I think one of the things on the very first slide that we talked about was, I think part of it is the restoration of some of the cuts that have happened in the past.
Correct.
And maybe it's not, maybe there's some happy medium in the middle of all of this. So the next cost center is school facilities. Again, level funded. We do have contracts in place for energy that I want to say, now I'm embarrassed to say it, but I do believe our pricing is in effect for the next school year. We'll circle back with Mr. Casper on that.
It is.
We actually really got fortunate and locked in really favorable electric and natural gas rates before the world went to hell in a handbasket, so, which worked in our favor. The detail by cost center, or by actual line, there's marginal change here. The last cost center to look at is district-wide programs. And this is one of those ones, I spoke about it earlier. There was a position in Esser that we brought into the operating budget. There's another position here that we're bringing into the operating budget. It's the school technology specialist, which has just been a vital, valuable position that we were very forthcoming with the committee. There were only a few positions that we were carrying in ESSER funds that were going to come into the operating budget, and these are two of them. And then, again, you know, last year's budget, I reduced the crossing guard line, and now with a new, very active, very passionate, very involved SRO, who I love. And I saw him when I was up here cleaning out the office. He had Sora, and I got to see Sora running around the field in the snow. He has done a great job of recruiting and retaining crossing guards. So we're a little bit overspent in that line. We'll be a little bit overspent this year, and then increasing the budget for next year. I want to say, when I got here, we had maybe 9. And I think we have 12 or 13 now, so he's done a great job.
He has.
And it's a benefit to keep our kids safe and help them travel and walk to school, safe routes to school. So
Just want to say, Sora has about 10 doggy toys in my office, and she now knows that, so she comes to the nurse's office
I bet you're
and
really
drops
sad
the old
about
one
that.
and takes the new one.
I bet you're
she
sad
is
about that.
she is a beautiful dog.
What?
I bet you're sad about that.
Oh, I am so sad. Whenever Miss Ramirez knocks on the window, she's like, I got her. She comes in today, she took a new one, she dropped the old one. Made my day.
Yeah, no, she's wonderful. So tonight's presentation, obviously, we went through all 5 cost centers this evening. Next week, I probably would join you by Zoom next week, sorry. It'll be revolving funds and grants and some FTE discussions. And it's also the public hearing next week. And then on the 9th, the committee will vote, and it'll become the committee's budget, and it will get submitted to the town administrator. So with that, are there any questions?
First of all, thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
I mean, it speaks volume for you to do this post-employment. And I know I speak for everyone on the board, and we appreciate your knowledge, your guidance, and just the hard work of these numbers. And it's important just to look at from a numbers perspective to let us know the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I know as a numbers guy, I really appreciate that. So
You're very welcome.
So, just so I think I'd like everyone, if you so choose, to have a comment, and just have a comment to go around, and then maybe have a free flow of discussion. John, could I ask if you have any initial thoughts, if you'd like to share that with the group, or you can pass, whatever you'd like.
I think on circuit breaker,
God bless you.
bless you. You know, and I don't think this is any newsflash. I think I've said this in prior years, that carrying it forward brings that certainty that is very important to the budgeting process. And
Right.
it creates stability throughout the entire fiscal year that I think, you know, should be our goal, one of our goals. So that's my view on that.
Okay. Karen?
I agree. I appreciate the work you guys do, and I know it's so hard. And I appreciate that you want to collaborate and play by the rules and work to that number, but that number just does not work for us. And to John's point, it's decimating not only circuit breaker, but then also our programs and our employees, and I just can't live with that.
Suzanne?
I
Thank you.
completely feel the same way. It's hard to think that we're making gains, right? And we're doing this great job, and we're meeting the kids where they are, especially after the pandemic, right? And then that has to sort of, like you said, addition by subtraction. Like we're just, it's not right. I'm like just trying to focus on what the solution can be for now and for this time, instead of like what ifs and could ifs and like us owning it instead of this being told to us this is what has to happen. It's like us owning what has to happen. And I think like we have to be really proactive right now, and I think it's on us to put a warrant article together and to flesh out ourselves what, like, not wait for the town to give us a revolving account.
Right.
I think we should be lobbying it for ourselves, and if we have to get up on town meeting floor and say, we either take this circuit breaker fund and spend it, or we're asking the town, I mean, I think it's on us to own this.
Well, so, but here's one of the problems, is that when we've asked that for consideration on
Just going to
issues,
say that.
they haven't, like,
Wait, consideration what, to put something in a warrant article?
Yes,
so
they
there
were
were,
told we haven't been allowed to.
so there are two, possibly three things that I can think of, where at the 11th hour, the the select board has not even brought it out for discussion.
But we're not gonna do this at the 11th hour, we're gonna
Right.
do it next
No,
week.
no.
But I'm
We
just-
didn't do it.
No, but
At
I'm
the-
saying.
At their
but-
11th hour.
But us too, but if we start it today and saying we're doing this, I mean, if Deb Newman can put cat stuff on
Okay,
the
so, but
warrant,
that's different.
or if someone can try to defund the school budget and get a warrant article for those
But
things.
that's different, then that's us going out and not going through the process and getting these signatures.
No, but I do agree with Suzanne. If this were to be started next week versus the end
I'm
of
down.
April.
Look, I'm down.
I'm just saying, like, I'm like, okay, we're at the mercy of one pie, and I totally get we all have to share one pie, right? But we know that the town has, free cash stuff, and we're not saying we're going to use the reserves, right? It's just
Having
it's
them.
insurance, and we can't spend this down one more penny. I mean, this is bad
Without
enough,
it.
but we can't spend this one more penny down without having the entire amount.
Jeopardized.
So, I mean, our article is to have a year's circuit breaker money every year in the revolving account. So that's gonna change too, because our circuit breaker money is gonna change every year. But if we have that in there, then there's some wiggle room for like the real money. And like, why aren't we owning that? Like, why are we like, oh, they're doing this to us? Like,
Well,
let's do something.
So I
So-
think the piece of the problem that I have here is that what we're hearing at every meeting is what a great financial position the town is in. But it's right now coming on the backs of the school. Because it's great that the school has, that the town has,
It's coming on the backs of everyone. It's coming on the backs of the recreation program, the library. Look at the library. I mean,
the library, you're
I'm
absolutely right.
I'm just saying, there's definitely.
But it's great to say that we all have all sorts of money in reserves.
totally
And it's
agree.
great to say we have all this free cash, but not at the time that we're having to cut $650,000.
And $700,000.
So it's really 1.2, 1.3.
It's really,
It's
it's,
Yeah, so
over $1
like,
million.
yay, Swampscott, we're in such great financial standing. Well,
so to.
Some
to-
of the financial standing is really important to us, right? Because it's really important. Like, for example, I'm like in a school. We wanted to have that rating that we have, so we
Right.
got the
Bonding at the
the
better
bonding that we
bonding.
got,
Yep.
right? Like it behooves us all to be in a really good financial place. But you're right. Like, you can't tout a town saying, "Look, our taxes are going down," but so is our school system.
yeah,
Right? Like, I get that. I totally get that. And when you look at the assessed values and you see the medium home in this town, like what it's worth,
$700,000 now.
you're just like, it's crazy that it's
It's just,
it's
it doesn't
nuts.
add up.
It doesn't.
So the interesting thing is, and Suzanne, I could not agree with you. I think that we would feel better as the people who are responsible for this budget is to take a lot more control of what we have right now. And, anyone could put with 10 registered voter signatures, and there are 5 of us here, you can put a warrant.
That's all you need is 10?
That's it.
Yeah, it's,
Question is, may voters place articles on a warrant in Massachusetts town meeting? Yes, voters may insert articles in the warrant. They have to do it before selectmen close the warrant to insert an article in the warrant for annual town meeting. At least 10 registered voters of the town must sign a written request.
All right, well, that would be the second way to do it,
I
right?
would prefer to do it the first way.
Right,
way
so
would
that-
be to do it to start to draft something, to look at what other towns do, to draft what we need, to create our persuasive argument for why this is best practice, and do it the right way. I mean, like, we don't wanna, I mean, this is managed, like, I think
I
it's
think
realistic.
that we were able to meet the town's guidelines of 2% growth for a few years, because there was areas that could be reduced. But
And because
is
we had
that-
federal grants.
Because we have
Yes.
Because we had grants, because the kids weren't in the building for quite a bit of time, because we were in hybrid and we didn't need substitutes, and
Right,
there were a
that's
whole
all
host of
over now.
factors. It's
Yeah.
all
That's
over.
all over.
But
Grants are coming to an
2%
end.
growth, I don't really know of any other school districts that are restricted to 2% growth.
So I think, right, so I think,
So, my new district, we're growing by 3.75, so
3.75.
so
that's the number.
I think a few things.
Sharon
One,
wants to say something.
Cheryl, okay.
I just wanted to add to that, Ipswich, the budget that the superintendent is putting forth is 5.7%.
Right, so
3.75.
no,
Five.
to my point, and not backing into that number, I'm just not sure why we don't make a budget of what we need to start with. What do we need to do everything that we're doing next year? Do you know what I mean? I mean, I'm not even talking about adding programs. I'm just talking about.
Well, we need the 675 and the 735. That's what we need.
So that's,
Well,
to
but
me,
to
what the
your point-
budget should be. That's what our budget should be,
Well, but to your point,
whatever percentage that
you
comes out to.
do have to go and periodically review
We
things.
do that every year.
I know,
That's
but like you
Well, what's
said,
that going to save?
but like rather than,
200,000, 300,000, you know?
but if so, yeah.
Right. We would, I'm saying that in the vein
Yeah.
of, we would always do that.
Yeah.
But remember in here, 180 to 200 technology,
Yeah.
No,
Right,
that's
I
not
know,
funded.
so, because we haven't even
Right,
discussed
I
the
know
money
that.
that we've
I'm
tried to
concerned about
recoup.
facilities.
year after
Facilities is
year.
not funded the way it should be now that we have a real director of facilities. I'm sorry,
So,
Mr. Chair.
that's okay. Listen, it's a very volatile issue. I look at the budget is that it's not just 675. It's 1.4 million.
Right.
That's what you're looking at reducing, is $1.4 million. That is unacceptable. And to everyone's point here, and there's a lot of different ways to do this, I actually agree with Karen, is that, you know, and we tried this last year, and, you know, we kind of got to the situation of the town administrator the town administrator requested from the select board and the finance committee, X dollars. We, as the committee, approved Y dollars. We were at this standstill. And I think, I don't quite know what to do, but we're 1.4 million in the hole.
So are you almost saying that I should submit to you, our budget should be the same recommendations, that I should submit to you a budget that is 1.3 million in the red?
Is that what you
No.
believe you need?
I think you have to submit a budget of what you need.
Yes,
Right.
Well,
but that's what you need, is the 1.4, 1.3, whatever that dollar is.
because what we got into last year is I submitted one budget.
And then they
school
use
committee-
that against us.
Right.
Right, which
Because you-
obviously we can't do that,
Right,
but
you
to
tried to do the
Karen,
right thing, and.
you know, to Karen's point, you know, and you very briefly touched on this business of, the administrator asking his departments to do two budgets, one, with regular and one 10% less. Like, that's baloney.
That is
Because
baloney.
to Karen's point, Karen said it really well, that like, then that becomes really, the 10% less becomes the real budget.
Correct.
And then it's like
The other
what
one's your
you
wish
dream
list,
about.
yeah.
So so it has to be the budget of what you need.
Yeah, you know what, and this is me, and I'd like everyone to weigh in. I would like you to do a budget to educate every student in this district. what that looks like. I have complete faith and confidence that you will keep an eye towards what we can reduce. But I'm looking at $1.4 million. I'm not looking at 675. I am looking at this circuit breaker because having lived that, I don't think it's appropriate for any family who's considering living in this community, may have an infant child who's about to turn 3, now wonder, is my neighbor gonna know my business? Because I, unfortunately, to educate my child, has to go to an outplacement setting at $350,000.
Look, in the same way that we rely on the finance committee and the town treasurer and the professionals to make decisions about whether or not, just because the money is in free cash, doesn't mean you can spend it. They have guidelines about what is best practice. And we know from our professionals that best practice is that you keep a year in arrears. So I think that having learned that, it is derelict of us to not enter into a budget season with that as a bare minimum.
I would agree. Does everyone agree with that?
Yes.
I do.
Everybody agree with that?
So that's not to say build a budget with another 1.4 million. That's just to say build a smart budget.
Build your
Educating
budget.
every child, to your point, and not,
Right.
and using best practice of
Correct.
keeping circuit breaker.
We can do that. I'm looking at
My team. You got the Wonder Twins up here.
So
Wonder
can
Twin
I
powers
can I
activated.
ask a couple questions?
Absolutely.
So first, Glenn, can I ask you to do some kind of communication, Connect Ed, robocall, whatever it is, so that people know that next week is our
Public hearing.
public hearing?
Yes.
I think, I don't know if that means speaking at the select board meeting but people need to know. And it's not just parents of students, but really townspeople.
But how are you going to get the town robocall list?
I don't know. That's why I just asked Glenn.
What do you mean?
I will,
Well, I don't know if it's a robocall. I don't know if it's a letter. I don't know what it is. But we have to get it out there.
yeah, I mean, whether it's, just even just put it on a social media page, but I will reach out to the town side to gain an understanding. I mean, if the town can send out a robocall about something,
A
a
classic
historical
car
commission
show.
that was canceled because of whatever was going on weather-wise,
Yeah.
I
like there's a
kind of think
gingerbread
that
car-
something
there's a
that's
gingerbread
as
show.
important as a budget hole of $1.4 million, I believe that they can send that out.
But let's be careful. It's not a budget shortfall. It's
Correct,
a
excuse me.
budget- It is a budget hearing.
Right, correct, excuse me.
Public hearing
It is
on
a
the
Public
school
hearing
budget.
on our budget.
School budget.
Right,
Right,
right.
I can do that.
I have another question on page 8, which is the public schools, the pie chart of the recommended budget. Is it possible, without a lot of heavy lifting, to get this going back, I don't know, 8 years, 10 years? I'm curious to see if and how these percentages have changed over time.
Have to be 8 or 10 years, can it be 5?
I was gonna say, can it be 5? Because I don't have.
I guess the problem with 5 is just that it's COVID, and, COVID impacts everything.
No, I can go back to 2018, 19.
But for transparency, the reason why I'm asking this is part of the question or the comment that I made before, which is that, this 34% of special education is very carefully protected by law, as it should be. I am curious to see how that allocation has grown as part of the budget, as part of the budget.
But I think it's a little unfair to ask Ms. Seibert, who's been here 4 years.
As much as we can get.
Okay, I think
So I
it's-
was gonna say, if I may, I think what you're looking for is more what the actual percentage of our budget. So that, I have data going back to 2018. Prior to that, what was in munis, I wouldn't.
Yeah, or I don't know if that's
Coming
what
out of
Desi
it.
has.
So I can do 2018 this chart for 2018 through FY '22.
And that's pre-pandemic.
I think that's fine, and, I mean, I'd love to see old data. The challenge with old data is.
Look,
It was
data's
just-
done different every year. We know
Yeah.
that.
We've
So
had how many
I'd like-
different
You know,
I'd like
police
five-
managers?
I'd like a minimum of 5 years.
I would like to understand
Yeah,
how much of our whole budget is special education, knowing, A, that special education costs have risen, and transportation costs have risen, but that needs have changed. You know, and Martha Raymond speaks to this so beautifully about how things have changed and what's gone on over the last couple of years, that, like, there's a lot of need. So how does that impact our budget? And are we gonna be sitting here in 5 years where it's 60% of the budget? And that can't be touched because that's the way the laws, but the laws are not providing for regular education. So,
So if you could go back as far as you can, I mean, within reason, obviously, and, you know, we want to make sure the numbers that you're giving us are accurate to your standards, I guess. And
FY '18 and beyond.
it's,
What you have trust in.
right, yeah, they have trust.
yeah, it's hard to hear 2018 because in my old lady brain, that's like last year.
Right,
And I know it's not, but,
okay.
so thank you.
Thank
You're-
you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. Thank you to everybody for the comments.
Oh, and one more thing. I
Okay.
think that we need to invite the Finance Committee here to do what we, remember maybe 2 or 3 years ago, we had a joint meeting with the Select Board, the
Right.
Finance Committee and us, where we talked through all of these
Are
issues.
you
and then
talking about a
some.
joint meeting or just invite them to the public hearing?
I don't know.
I think it should be
Both.
invite them
They
to.
should go to the
Yeah,
public
just
I
invite
think they
them.
should be invited to the hearing.
I mean, both, really.
Well, no, I think between now and town meeting, you could set up a joint meeting,
Yeah.
but I think invite them
Not
to
in
the
a couple
public hearing.
weeks.
But yeah,
Right.
they definitely need a personal invitation too.
Why don't we work on a personal invitation to them?
You can work with Nancy on
I
that.
can work with Nancy.
That's perfect. She's back from vacation
Okay,
tomorrow.
good. And I'll be back on Monday.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much. Chair updates. How apropos is that the superintendent and I will be meeting, finally, with the group from the tri-chairs, the the select board, finance committee, and the town administrator. It's been challenging to get a date. We are meeting Monday morning at 8:30, allegedly.
Yes, no, we are.
We are? Okay,
And Ms.
good.
Stella will be joining us.
Great, excellent. And I can promise this board that our discussions will be in legible form and be presented with passion at that tri-share meeting. And I will report back next Thursday what the results of that will be. And that's really all I have for a chair update. Subcommittee, school business committee updates, if any.
Building
I
committee?
mean, school building committee updates, if any.
There's no way.
Sorry.
This committee is just
Sorry.
scary.
Sorry.
Yeah, everything, I mean, it's unbelievable. There are so many moving pieces and parts, and every Thursday when I go to the meeting in the trailer, I just can't believe how many people are working together to make this happen, and the team between the construction and the site team and the designers and the OPMs and Max. It's like a one-man show. It's
Yep.
like unbelievable, the collaboration. And I mean, today they were talking about a threshold between the stairs and like the interior stairs, right? And the tile and what this piece is gonna look like. And they were already thinking about it today. I was just like, right. So anyway, it's been fun. It's going really well, and they've been blasting for a week and a half now.
I really want to thank you for sharing that video of the blast.
Yeah.
It was like a balloon. It was like,
Well, I think you saw a small one, and there are some bigger ones, but there's a mat over everything, and there's pretty much a barrier around them.
And it just
And
mumbles
they've also drilled a lot of holes around the property, so that like keeps sort of it
it absorbs
inside
it.
the property, yeah. So it's really so much.
That's
it's
exciting.
Such a letdown.
I will say this, when I
think it's gonna be
went
something great.
online today to actually try and find that before you sent it to me, I was just doing a quick Google search, and Stanley School, and the first thing that popped up on Google was, you know, the school and the address and the phone number permanently closed.
I was like, oh. Yeah, it's exciting though, to see it coming together, and that we're still on schedule, and everything is just every day, makes me happy.
Great, awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, the consent agenda. The consent agenda is designed to expedite the handling of routine and miscellaneous business of the district. The school committee may adopt the entire consent agenda with one motion. At the request of any committee member, any item or items may be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda for discussion. Tonight we have 5 bullet points to discuss, if we so choose. A, regular session minutes from December 15th, 2022. Subcommittee meeting of the whole minutes, October 13th, 2022. Budget committee of the whole from November 28th, 2022. Donation of from Eastern Bank Foundation, sponsorship community grant for the robotics team. I'd just like to read that if people don't mind. It's dated the 15th of December, 2022. Name of person submitting the form is Brandy Wilbur. Position, robotics mentor at the high school. Name of the donor grant organization, Eastern Bank Foundation, based out of Lynn. They're giving us $1,000 sponsorship for community for the Swampscott High School robotics team. There are no restrictions. Our thanks to Eastern Bank Foundation for their very generous grant. Many students take advantage of the robotics team. It's a fun thing if you ever watch anything online about it, what they do. So we really appreciate the dollars to make the robotics team continue moving forward. Thank you to them as well. And then lastly, warrant number 23-25, 23-27, 23-29. Any discussion about any of these items? Can I have a motion to approve?
I'll make the motion.
Second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously. With that, I just want to add again one statement. The budget is what we do. And we've said it before, it's our fiduciary responsibility. And I look forward to the next couple weeks of learning more about the budget to our district and presenting that not only to the community, but to those in power of the dollars. With that, can I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
I'll do it.
Second.
Sorry.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yay.
Aye. We are out.